and staff to share their expertise and passion for their subject matter with their colleagues and invited guests across campus and disciplines. The series will represent a wide range of academic and topical presentations and celebrates the breadth of knowledge and experience in WVC's community. I want to let you know that we have a nice talk coming up on November 3rd called Brazil in Peril, and that's at 2 p.m. So, my name is Scott Bailey. I'm the head of the art department here, and I know Dr. Dan Stevens in a variety of different contexts. He's a great colleague, a friend, and actually I know him in the context of a student as well. See, we teach together a learning community class that merges drawing and ornithology, constantly putting those two fields together as much as we can to merge the art and the science. And what it also does is it makes us continually and simultaneously instructors and learners of each other's disciplines. So Dan has opened my eyes to the world of birds, the beautiful, mysterious, incredible world of birds that I had hardly noticed for all the years before. So for instructors here at WVC, we teach from our experience and from our passion. And when somebody is truly an expert in their field, their students really get a sense of what it's like to be studying with a master. Dan, as all of his students knows, is truly an expert in his field. I can tell you that so often when we were out on field trips, he would be talking, and then at some point in mid-sentence he'd say, "Oh, over my right shoulder, there are several cedar waxwings," that we were completely oblivious to otherwise. He's constantly in tune with the birds that are around us. And that doesn't come easy. It comes from decades of experience and study in that field. He earned his bachelor's degree at Boise State, a master's degree at Central Washington, and a doctorate at Idaho State, all in biology. He's birded across the United States, from Alaska to New York, from Florida to California, and overseas as well. He's been past president of the North Central Washington Audubon chapter, recent past president of the Washington Ornithological Society. He spent 30 years banding, including 20 years for the Institute of Bird Populations. He has 30 years of background in conducting breeding and bird surveys, and has 20 years as the compiler of the Wenatchee Christmas bird count. But he knows this area, after being here since 1990, he knows this area's birds better than just about anybody. And that's what we're going to be treated to tonight, is a study of his experience with the birds that are around us in Confluence Park. So before I bring him on, I'm told to tell you to make sure you turn your cell phones off. And I want to warn you that you're being recorded. So even your little voices in this great hall that picks up everything might be heard, okay, on tape. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Dan Stevens.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? Yes. Wow. Okay. Okay. So there will be question and answer session afterwards. So you may have a lot of questions. You can write them down if you want. But there'll be a lot to sort of absorb. So we'll go for whatever 45 minutes to an hour, and then have a question and answer session. Okay. So thanks, Scott, and I'd like to thank some other people too. First of all, I'd like to thank the photographer, professional photographer, my friend Tom Munson, for the photographs. he gave me permission to use these photographs a couple weeks ago, and you'll see that he's a professional photographer. Also, I'd like to thank Vaughn Pope for the maps we're going to look at, and everyone at Wenatchee Valley College, and all of you for showing up. Thank you. So, let's get started. So, Wenatchee Confluence Park includes 3 areas. They're all owned by the PUD. There's Walla Point Park, and Horan Natural Area, and Confluence State Park. Confluence State Park and Horan Natural Area are managed by the Washington State Parks, and Walla Point Park is managed by the PUD. So just to get us oriented here, Town Toyota Center, you pull into the park here, there's baseball fields. This is great birding right here. You can look out over this bay and see the terns and the waterfowl and the shorebirds right in this area. This is the swimming area right here. This is the trail down into Horan, and this is the heart of the park. All the good passerine birding is right here. And then this is the RV park, Confluence State Park. And there's great birding along this fence here, but it's hard to look. You have to look over the fence. So we're going to talk about these areas and where the birds are found. I may bring up some of these spots. I'll talk about this spot right here. It's the bench. That's where you go if you want to see out into the bay, and I'll call that the bench. So when I first moved to Wenatchee, I was fortunate to meet a lot of great birders. Ruth Ortiz, Phyllis Madden, Howard Oswood, and they had a checklist started, so I added to the checklist, or took over the checklist, and continue to modify it. It's an evolving document, and I have copies afterwards if you'd like one. So this is the heart of the area, Horan Natural Area, Horan, we call it, and it was modified by the PUD. All these were man-made channels. This was a natural lake, this was a natural pond, and these are the radio towers here. So it's that grassland habitat, whatever, riparian habitat. And we'll start with the splash. This is, I'll go through species by species, and we'll start in the spring. So the first birds that show up, one of the first birds that shows up in right around April, right around mid-March, they start to come up from the south, the wood ducks. This is a female wood duck. And there's the male wood duck. Some people consider this the most beautiful bird in North America. They have the helmet. They call that the helmet, and they nest in the park. So when I go through, I'll classify the birds basically as they're nesting birds, they're resident nesting birds. They're neotropical birds that come up only for the summer. There are lots of migrants, and they're just random birds that just show up in the park. So the PUD has a number of nesting boxes out there. You probably may have seen them if you've been out on the park. There are about 33 boxes in the Horan Natural Area, and 6 of them were initiated this year, and they raised about 43 young wood duck nestlings just in the Horan Natural Area. So they have a lot of problems with predators and surprisingly mink, and there are raccoons that predate the nests. They're easy to identify from when they're flying because they have this large tail. Both the male and female have a large tail that kind of hangs down, so when they're flying around, you may not see them up close, but you'll see them flying through the park. And then in the summer, they molt. The males molt into this plumage, which all ducks molt into. This is called the eclipse plumage. And they're only in this plumage for just a few weeks. A lot of times they've already left the park by now, by late summer. So this is a male wood duck in eclipse plumage. Same one we saw earlier, they just molt. And then by October, they molt back into their bright, beautiful green plumage. So that's the wood duck. There they are in a group. sorting out the mating situation, looking for wood boxes. And they can find a little whistling sound. So we're just going to go through a variety of species. This is the rough-legged hawk. They come through rarely in the spring. There are bird winters in this area, and they breed in Alaska. So you can tell a rough-legged hawk because they have these white windows out here in their wings, and a black belly, and a white head. And most of them also show this terminal tail band. Rough-legged hawks. In the spring, they're kind of a rare bird in the spring. Common on the Waterville Plateau, though. And they leave us in their rearview mirrors and head north in March. Rough-legged hawks. Then everyone's familiar probably with the osprey, or the sea hawk, or the fish hawk, it's also called. These birds have unusually large wings. The wing loading is tremendous. They have huge wings for their body. As you can see, they can also kite. They can stay stationary in the air, kite in the air. And the way they hunt is they'll kite, look at a fish, look for a fish, and dive straight into the water for the fish, and hit the water with their entire body, and then use their heavy wings or strong wings to pull themselves out of the water. So they'll spot a fish, go down, catch a fish, and hit the water, go completely under. They have very hooked talons, so that when they grab the fish, they don't have to squeeze very hard. It just hooks the fish. They found osprey skeletons hooked to large salmon. So ospreys sometimes get drugged down and they drown because they hit the water. You'll see that bald eagles fish very differently. And then when they carry their fish, they carry it head first for aerodynamic purposes. Common down at the park, arrive in the spring and breed, and then they leave in around September 1st. Okay, this species is the green-winged teal. They are rare in the park in the winter, and they start to show up in the spring. Male and female green-winged teal. And we haven't ever recorded them breeding in the park yet. They're usually around in the summer, more common in the fall. So they're a migrant and a summer bird that we haven't recorded as a breeding bird in the park yet. They may breed, we just haven't found them breeding yet. Male green-winged teal. Then the other two species of teal are rare. They show up in the spring and sometimes in the fall. This is a blue-winged teal. And this is the cinnamon teal. The cinnamon teal are never here in the winter, so they come up in April. You see a few of them, and they're gone. And occasionally you see some in the fall when they get back. Cinnamon teal. Some shorebirds, again from the bench, you can look out over that bay and see shorebirds in the spring. This is called the greater yellowlegs. Right, orangish yellow legs and a slightly upturned bill. Fairly rare spring migrant. Rufous hummingbirds. Only migrants in the park. And you don't really rarely get a very good look at them because they're just migrating through. There's no feeders in the park. There's a few currents that they feed on. They're pretty uncommon in the park. Only see them in the spring. Then some of the neotropical migrants show up. Starting in April, this is the western kingbird. They winter in Mexico. And they nest in the park. It's confirmed breeding of western kingbirds in the park. Saints Phoebe, rare in the winter, there's a few around in the winter, and they show up in March, and they breed also in the park. And this is a Saints Phoebe again, with usually you can tell if they're breeding because they'll carry food around. If they're just going to eat the food, they'll just eat it, and you won't see them with the food. So this is the phoebe probably nesting, and it's like a cricket to take to its nest. And then in March, the swallows start coming in. And this is the tree swallow. They nest in the park in cavities in the cottonwood trees. And it's right down in the Grand Natural Area, which is the largest cottonwood forest along the Columbia River between the ocean and the Canadian border. So common nesters, and there's another tree swallow. So tree swallows don't have any white around their eyes. And then the dark blue iridescence. Green swallows, this is a species that comes very early. We see them in the summer. We haven't confirmed their nesting in the park. And of course they have violet and green, violet green swallow, and white around their eyes. These are the cliff. They nest under the Blue Bridge, if you ever walk down to the Blue Pedestrian Bridge. And they build a nest with mud. They build a little gourd-shaped nest. And there's quite a fairly large colony of cliff swallows nesting in the park. And barn swallows also nest in the park. They have a long forked tail, which you can really see there. And they make a mud nest also, but they don't nest in colonies. They're just spread out in buildings and under bridges. And you can see the mud. They use mud and sticks, so this bird's obviously building a nest. So another clue that it's a breeding bird in the park, building a nest. Then the turkey vultures show up in usually April. Beautiful turkey vultures. They nest up in the forest and work their way down the valley occasionally. We see them in Kashmir, and then occasionally we see them in the park. They're more of a forest bird. They're the only bird that can really smell very well. As you can tell, there's a pretty good nasal cavity there. They can smell a dead animal about a mile away. One of the few birds that has a sense of smell. And then the harlequin ducks come up the Wenatchee River in the spring. And we sometimes see them from the Bluefoot Bridge. Male and female harlequin ducks. They nest up in the Icicle Creek and Shaston Creek and up in Mason Creek, in the smaller creeks in the Wenatchee River Bridge. They probably come down, in the fall they probably come down the Wenatchee River, but we haven't ever seen them in the fall of the park. We see them in the Columbia River. It's just a matter of spotting one in the fall, maybe they just fly over the park a little bit. But harlequin ducks, male and female harlequin. Then there's a few more rare sandpipers that show up in the park in the spring. American avocet. You might wonder why its bill is recurved like that. What could it possibly be eating? Well, they just skim the surface of the water for insects with that bill. Recurved. American avocet's rare in the spring in the park. These are common in the basin. They probably just overshoot in the spring and end up in the Wenatchee Valley and then make their way back to the basin to breed. Another shorebird is a very common bird in the park because they're rare in the winter, but they're very common in the spring and some in the fall. The killdeer. So they're famous for having the broken wing display. And you can see two different kinds of coloration in this bird. This is cryptic coloration, or camouflage, blending in with the background. And then this kind of coloration is called disruptive coloration. It breaks up the pattern of the bird, doesn't it look like a bird. So two different kinds of coloration, cryptic and disruptive. So we also have, all the shorebirds are, they show no dimorphism. Males and females are identical. The ducks are the opposite, very, very dimorphic. So presumably that's the male on the top. We have no other way of knowing because there's no marking that shows the difference. So they both have red around their eyes, and sometimes females are a little larger. So we do see breeding. We see nests, and we see breeding killdeer in the park. Then we have in the spring and the fall we have this little sandpiper, kind of uncommonly comes to the park. Semi-palmated plover. And they just have one ring, and killdeer has two, except that juvenile killdeer have one ring. So sometimes people will see a juvenile killdeer and think it's a semi-palmated plover. Be careful. So again, if you see baby birds in the park, that's confirmation of breeding. And if you see any baby birds in the park, please let me know so we can make sure we have the record if it's in the record. So a juvenile killdeer, just one breastband. Another bird that overshoots the basin, common in the basin, they show up here in the spring. Occasionally is a black-necked stilt. Extremely long legs. By the way, this is the ankle joint. And their knee joint is right up in here. So extremely long. It's called tibial tarsus, and this is the tarsal metatarsus, which are it's basically its toes, it's standing on its toes. And they're often in water, so we can't even see that ankle joint. This one looks like it's in the wind or something, I'm not sure what it's doing. And then they're interesting to watch mate, as all the birds are. They have interesting mating dance. Black-necked stilt. These pictures are taken over basically. Where are we getting here? Swans come through in the spring and in the fall. This is the tundra swan. Those tundra swans have a little yellow mark on their bill, and they have a much shorter neck. And reflections are fun to play with, especially if you get the right kind of camera equipment. Tom Munson's cameras are, he packs about $10,000 worth of cameras with him when he goes into the And these are trumpeter swans, the larger swans, and they're, again, in the spring and the fall, kind of uncommon, and these do actually winter here. These were almost extinct, and they come down from Alaska and winter in the valley. Trumpeter swans. Long-billed curlews, again, they're just occasionally show up in the park in the spring. They nest in grasslands. It's a trick. It's fun to watch them try to catch grasshoppers with that bill. It doesn't look like they should be doing it. The bill is adapted for their wintering grounds. They winter in mud flats, and they stick that bill way down in the mud to pull out sand, fleas, and different kinds of aquatic. But in the summer, it doesn't do them much good. They can catch a grasshopper. Long-billed curlew. Golden eagles are fairly common nesters in our canyons, but they rarely show up over the park. We occasionally get ones that fly over. So golden eagles are actually bigger than bald eagles, or heavier than bald eagles. Their wingspan isn't quite as big, and you can always tell they have the gold nape. And golden eagles, rare spring visitors in the park. Some other hawks come through. This is the Swainson's hawk. Again, rarely coming through in the spring. They're common out in the Waterville Plateau, but they don't come through the park very much. Swainson's hawk. And then we get more of the neotropical migrants. This is an eastern kingbird. Breeds in the park. This species spends its winter in the Amazon basin. So they're one of the later arrivals that come in May. So they migrate several thousand miles, and both in the spring and fall, obviously. Eastern kingbird, western peewee, a little flycatcher that nests in the park. Flycatchers are hard to identify. This one, they have a little vest because it's not buttoned down the front. They have very long wings and no eye ring. Tiny little eye ring there. No eye ring. Western red peewee, common nesters in the park. Spotted sandpipers. They are rare in the winter, they show up in the spring, and they're also common nesters in the park along the rocky shores. Spotted sandpipers. Pelicans are becoming more and more common in Washington as we see drought and desertification to our south. They're moving north, so they're becoming more and more common. American white pelican. And they've been seen at the park mostly in the spring. They don't breed, they're just passing through. One of the owls we occasionally get in the spring at the park is the western screech owl. But no confirmed nesting of screech owls. They do nest in town though, because they like all the planted spruce trees like the Norway spruce and the Colorado blue spruces. This bird is also rare in the winter and it shows up and breeds in the park, American kestrel. This is a male. That's the blue-gray feathers here, the scapulars and some of the wing coverts are blue-gray, and then the mustache are American kestrel. And they're under watch. This is a photographic trick. We're trying to take pictures. This is called backlighting. So this is the shaded part of the bird, and the sun's coming from the backside. One of the features of the American kestrel is their wings are actually somewhat translucent. You can see through them. And that's one of the ways you tell them from some of the other small falcons. This is the same bird, top lit. In other words, the light's coming down from the top. Little falcon, American kestrel, nesting in the park, counting nesters. And there's the female. Female has, we can't really see that well, but the female doesn't have any of that blue on the scapulars on the wings. It has the mustache mark on the face. American kestrel. And then we have a blackbird. So the females always choose, especially in songbirds, the female chooses the male. And so this guy is showing his couplets. We press the female to show that he's healthy. And then there's two reasons why they're showing off. One is to impress the female. They choose a territory, the female comes, and if there's enough food in the area, the female will stick around and build a nest. The second reason they have their coloration, they look the way they do, is to scare off their other conspecifics. They scare off their rivals. First time I saw this picture, I was a little bit scared. Red-winged blackbirds. They've been common at the park, but there's a water issue at the park. If you've been down there recently, in the last 5 years, there's less and less water in the park. So there's fewer and fewer red-winged blackbirds. We can talk more about the water problem at the park as we go. Here's the female. One of the reasons why red-winged blackbirds require water and cattails is because they like to eat aquatic insects. This is a dragonfly naiad, aquatic dragonfly. So that's their main diet is truly aquatic insects. The pond is dried up in the park because of some changes in the irrigation runoff and different things. And so fewer and fewer red-winged blackbirds. But the females have a little bit of red on their wing. Otherwise they're very dimorphic. Everyone's favorite bird, the western tanager. They migrate through the park in pretty good numbers in the spring and in the fall. Neotropical migrant. They do not nest in the park, they just pass through. Western tanager, and they nest up in the conifers. Not too far from Wenatchee, up in the mountains around Lake Wenatchee, are common nesters. Western tanagers. Some warblers come through the park, and this is one of the most common migrants in the park. The yellow-rumped warbler. And that's what the lumbers have called it, yellow-rumped warbler. Now, there's a move, a lot of splitters are pulling species apart now, and we'll probably be able to call this the Audubon's warbler again. Because it's turned out that they do interbreed in British Columbia, but the zone where they interbreed, the hybrid zone is very narrow, and there's no G's crossing it. So we'll probably get our name back. I learned this bird as the Audubon's warbler back in the 60s and 70s. And then they changed the name, the yellow-rumped warbler, which I don't like. So we'll get Audubon's warbler back, hopefully. These birds show up in May, yellow warblers, common nester in the park. This is the male with red streaks on his breast. Every feather on this bird is yellow. Even these red ones have yellow on their edges. Common nester in the park, yellow warblers. They require willow to nest in, so there's more willow in the park. They're very sensitive to overgrazing and habitat destruction. Yellow warblers. This is a rare breeder at the park. We found it breeding at the park. It's not there, not seen every year. Common yellowthroat. It's a small warbler. It likes to nest, and there is near where the red-winged blackbirds nest, down in the Moran area. Common yellowthroat. These are easy to detect and have a very distinctive song, as all the warblers do. These guys say witchy, 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 witchy. Easy song to detect. Another bird that migrates to pretty good numbers, but they're sulking down low in the brush, the Gillivree's warbler. We've never seen them nesting in the park. They come through in May, and we see them again in July. You can tell them they have this dark gray hood, right over their head, and a broken eye ring. The Gillivree's warbler is named after Dr. McGillivray, a Scottish doctor who never set foot in North America. And it something. This is the Nashville warbler, another migrant. The gray hood and complete eye ring and the yellow throat. So similar to the McGillivrays, but warblers are notoriously difficult to photograph. Flip around in the bushes, hard to get a good look at, or let alone a good picture of. So just catch them and hold them in your hand and see really well and get a good picture of them. So when bird's eye, you can obviously get some good pictures. This is the only picture I put of a banded bird. So you can see, barely see the yellow throat, complete eye ring, and then you can see features when you're holding the bird that you can't see when the bird's flying around. One of them, in this case, is they have a rusty cap, which they never show. You have to have them in your hand to see that rusty cap. Another migrant in the spring, the Wilson's warbler, fairly common migrant. So these birds breed up in the alder forests and the alder avalanche shoots at the Cascades. And on heavy snow years, they'll actually hang out in the park for a couple, 3 weeks and wait for the snow to melt and then move up in the Cascades to nest. Wilson's warbler. Townsend's warbler, common nester in our forests. Townsend's warbler. And a rare bird that's actually nests up in Leavenworth and nests up in Hemorrhage Canyon. For some reason, it just doesn't ever nest or stick around in the park. The yellow-breasted chat, a large warbler. And then American redstart comes through in late April and early May and breeds up in Okanagan County. Sort of a rare or uncommon migrant through the park. And you only see them in the spring. A lot of these warblers we see mostly in the spring. In the fall, they're hard to identify anyway because they roll into a fall plumage. Then we have cowbirds, brown-headed cowbirds that show up in the spring. So these birds are brood parasites. The males fly around in small groups, attract females, they mate, and then the females lay their eggs in other birds' nests. They're brood parasites. So this male is actually, this is a display. He's displaying to try to attract females, and then the females are very drab, and they just sulk around and lay their eggs in other birds' nests. They never see their young, they never raise their young. It's really common in other parts of the world. This is the only species we have that's in our area in North America. Actually, it's a brood parasite. Some cuckoos and other species do it in Asia. Brown-headed cowbird. A very common migrant to the park that a lot of people have a hard time identifying. They don't really know what it is. If they're singing, they have a very distinctive song, but this is the warbling vireo. Very plain bird. Very distinctive song. This is a breeder, the gray catbird. It shows up in the spring in May and makes a lot of cat-like songs. This bird is jazz virtuoso. This bird shows its health and its vigor by singing innumerable, just hundreds of different songs. In fact, some of these birds don't sing the same song over again. They sing literally thousands of different songs, and that shows their vigor. This is a bird in the shade, and here's one in the sun, and you can see the undertail coverts. So, fun to listen to at the park. They do make a cat-like meow every once in a while. A very broad range of songs they sing. So one of the examples of birds that are arriving earlier and earlier at the park to breed. The western kingbird is doing that. This is the Bullock's oriole. And they used to come in May, mid-May. Now they're showing up in April because it's getting warmer. They come up earlier as a response to climate change. Bullock's oriole. And again, we're always watching, especially in June, for baby birds, juvenile birds. This is a juvenile bullet squirrel, as evidence for breeding. This is a fledgling, it just left the nest. It's dependent on the parents still for food, and obviously this bird did not breed, in Quincy or somewhere and fly yet. This was evidence that the bird, this species nested. Occasionally we get crossbills at the park in the spring. A male red crossbill, female red crossbill. They're obviously conifer forest birds. We don't get them very often, but they do show up in the spring. These birds show up in the spring and occasionally in the fall. They don't nest in the park. This is evening grosbeak. More of a conifer bird that just shows up and they eat the seeds of the Siberian elements all over the park. Evening grosbeaks, male, female evening grosbeaks, they'll come to your feeder if they're around. They're very eruptive, very irregular. Some years we don't have them at all, other years there'll be hundreds of them. Evening grosbeaks. And then one of the last arrivals at the park in the spring are the common nighthawks. These are Capomogophories. They're goats, they're called goat suckers, is a common name for their order. They're insectivorous, but they have this huge mouth. You can't see it unless it's open, but then the gape comes through back to here. And someone thought that they must use that to suck on goats, called goat suckers. But they're insectivore. We've not found them nesting at the park. You see them in the summer, but they're so cryptically colored that we just have never found a nest. We never got confirmation of nesting at the park. Common nighthawks. Black-headed grosbeaks nest in the park. And house wrens nest in the park. These birds nest in a wide variety of habitats, including in the Andes. They nest all through the Western Hemisphere, North and South America. House wren. And this is a spring and fall migrant through the park. We've never seen them nesting in the park. Eared grebe. And the grebes are famous for carrying their young around on their back. So they do nest in Washington State. We just have never reported eared grebes in the park. Heron, this is a yellow-crowned night heron, one of the rare birds in the park. And more migrants. Hermit thrush, migrant. The category of the migrants are the largest group of birds that come to the park. There's over 100 birds that just migrate through the park, so it's an important migratory area. Here's a nesting bird, the little downy woodpecker. They're year-round residents. The male has red on its head, the female does not, although you can't tell in this picture, but this is a female. Downy woodpecker, it's the smallest woodpecker in the park. And then here's the largest woodpecker, the flicker, northern flicker. The cavity nesters, and this is the male with the mustache mark. And the female is another male. And the female with no mustache mark. Northern flicker. Gulls. This is the ring-billed gull. You see them all summer long. They nest somewhere in the Columbia River on an island somewhere. We've never seen them nesting right at the park. Ring-billed gull, and they're scavengers. Here's a ring-billed gull about to snatch something off the water. Very distinctive, very light, almost white mantle and back. And then here's our other common gull, the California gull. It just has a little black and red mark on its lower mantle. Again, you see them around all year round, but we haven't confirmed they're nesting in the park. Gadwall, no confirmed nesting, but they do breed a lot of places in the area. And mallards, of course, common nesters in the park. Big flying mallard pictures before they land, like this. And fun birds to watch in the park, very common at the park. Brewer's blackbird, another bird that's common in the summer, but we've never found them nesting in the park. The white eye, and then, of course, Canada geese, intended use. Common nesters in the park. It's always fun to look at photographs of birds out of their habitat. It was completely out of place. Obviously it is, but it just landed up on this ridge somewhere in Tom. Picture of it. California quail, common in Wenatchee, common in the park. They're breeders. Very photogenic, cool birds. California quail. Probably were not native to this area. I'm not sure who brought them in, where they came from. There's still controversy over whether they're actually native to the Wenatchee area or not. And then some little top-knot, very photogenic birds. The American goldfinch. Nesters in the park, state bird. Bewitched wren, this is a bird that's increased in our area, probably due to climate change. I'm not sure what's causing them to increase. They first appeared in the park a couple of years ago, and now there's several in the park, Bewitched wrens. And here's a extremely common bird in Wenatchee, house finch, year-round residents, and they are nesters in the park. Ringneck pheasants nest in the park. Male ringneck pheasant. They're not native. These are actually hybrids of Chinese and Asian pheasants. I'm going to try to get birds running, flying, pictures of birds, action pictures of birds. And the female ringneck pheasant. Great herons are common year-round residents in the park. We had a nest just this last year, so they're confirmed nesters in the park. This is one of the few birds that's actually been documented to have killed a human. A lady went out in the field to pick up what she thought was a wounded great blue heron. She turned around and stabbed her in the private artery, and she bled out. Huge, they're over 4 feet tall, very strong, great blue heron. And they catch large fish. This bird looks like it might be struggling to get this fish down, but they'll swallow it head first. And I didn't see it, I don't know for sure, but I imagine this bird probably did swallow this fish, because I've seen them swallow fish this big. They just swallow them whole, head first, straight down. And there's a big lump in their throat for a while. They think they would strangle themselves. Common nesting birds in the park, black-capped chickadees, all year round. This is adult, and this is a juvenile black-capped chickadee. You can tell it's a juvenile because it's got a yellow gape. And also its feathers are very loose and not very smooth. So a common nesting species in the park, black-capped chickadee. Both the kingfishers, nest in the park, year-round residents. It's one of the few species that has the female more colorful than the male. This is a female. And they're also head first divers. They dive straight in, down a foot or two and catch fish, including Tom's little goldfish out of his palm, apparently. Belted kingfisher, common nesters in the park. Mourning doves, nest in the park. And then about 10 years ago, we got this invasion of this bird in the Wenatchee area and in the park. Eurasian collared doves started to appear. They're a little bit larger and they're a little bit lighter colored, and they have a ring around their neck. We were worried that they would displace the mourning doves, but several studies the last couple of years have shown that they haven't really displaced them. They're apparently not having any effect on our mourning doves. Eurasian collared doves. By the way, there's no hunting season on this. They're open year round. You can kill as many as you want. And I know people who shoot them out their back door with a pellet gun. I guess they're delicious. Eurasian collared doves. You just can't discharge a firearm in city limits. I guess you can shoot a pellet gun, not a firearm. So, common bird in the park, but no confirmed nesting. So if you see cedar waxwings nesting in the park, let me know. We'll try to confirm their nesting. These birds have little waxy tips on their secondaries, and yellow terminal tail band, and a yellow belly, and yellow undertail coverts. Cedar waxwings are common in the park, but we don't really see that in the summer. We've never confirmed them as nesting in the park. This bird has never been seen in the park. It's been seen in town, but we don't have a single record of the Bohemian waxwing in the park. So this is the next bird I would expect to appear in the park. Far north nester, they appear only here in the winter. They're irregular, eruptive. Some years there'll be lots of them. No records of Bohemian waxwings in the park yet. Great horned owl, nice. There's another Bohemian waxwing. You can see the sort of rusty colored undertail coverts, and they're just larger and kind of grayer colored than the cedar waxwing. If you noticed Tom's pictures, he's a professional photographer. When you take a picture, you never put the bird in the middle of the picture. The bird's off to the side. You try to get something else in the picture besides the bird. It makes the photography much more interesting than just a bird in the middle of the picture. Great horned owls are in the park. We don't have any confirmed nesting of them in the park. You see them every once in a while down there. They nest in all kinds of habitats. So we're not sure if they're visiting in the summer or migrating through or what. Great horned owls are the largest indoor owls, and they'll chase off eagles, menacing, very strong talons, but no confirmed nesting in great horned owls. These birds are down in the cattails. This is a common snipe, a Wilson snipe as it's current. Wilson snipe. And it's got streaks on the head, streaks on the back. There's another migrant that comes through called a long-billed dowitcher. It has no streaks. No streaks on the back, no streaks on the head. Same long bill, but it's only a migrant. The Wilson snipe is a breeder. You've seen juvenile Wilson snipes in the park. Another common bird in the park, that breeds in the park, red-tailed hawk. And red-tailed hawks have this patagial mark here. And carpal mark, and only the adults have a red tail, but they all have a dark head and a breastband. Red-tailed hawk. Song sparrows are common year-round residents in the park. Oops. I skipped a bunch. There's an American robin. This is a female, because it has a lighter colored head. And the male with a nest. You know, of course, because it's not eating the food, it's carrying the food, so it's carrying it to a nest, carrying it to young. American robin, male with a dark head. Crows are common in the park, American crow. And nest in the park, down year-round. Numbers are increased in the park, or in the Wenatchee area for the last 20 years or so. And then we see ravens in the park also. But no nesting, they just fly over us usually. Common raven. Much heavier bill, and then they have sort of a kind of a pointed tail, kind of a diamond-shaped tail. Common ravens. So black-billed magpies are common up in farmland, especially in the basin, around Quincy and Moses Lake. They'll show up sort of random any time of the year at the park. Just one here, one there. I've only seen them a couple times myself at the park. Black-billed magpies, very interesting birds. These birds have a funeral ceremony that they determine. When they find a dead relative of theirs, they have a certain behavior they exhibit that is equivalent of having a service or funeral for their dead conspecific. And very, very interesting birds to study. They're a corvid, they're related to crows, so very intelligent birds. This is another bird that's like the magpie. It just shows up randomly in the park any time of the year. Occasionally, one or two yellow-headed blackbirds just appear in the park. They don't breed there. Yellow-headed blackbirds are common in the basin. They just somehow end up in the park for a day or two and move on. Pie-billed grebes, no confirmed nesting. Marsh wrens, another bird that is mostly in the fall. They show up in the fall. We don't have any confirmed nesting of marsh wrens in the park. And we're losing our water in the park, so that's part of the reason why we're not seeing as many marsh wrens in the park. Another bird that shows up mostly in the fall and the winter is the red-breasted nuthatch. There are other nuthatches, but the red-breasted nuthatch has the eye stripe, the superciliary, and then some reddish color on the breast, usually facing down, usually down on the slope. This is probably someone's feeder. You don't see too much sunflower seed out in the wild, probably Tom's feeder. Common loons come to the park in the spring and in the fall. You see them in their breeding plumage in the spring, usually in May. Off the bench, if you go to the bench and look out, you'll see loons. This is a male. No, actually, it's a male or female. There's no dimorphism in loons. They're the same. And here's a male common loon. You rarely ever hear them with their long loon-like call in the park. But they do nest in Washington, up at some of the lakes in northern Washington. And then we get another small loon in the fall and winter, Pacific loon. And this is a Pacific loon in the winter plumage. Sort of very drab gray bird, beautiful in the summer, but we never see them in their summer plumage. This is a Pacific loon. In the winter, we get these little wrens called Pacific wrens. They come down from the mountains. Pacific wren, loud, beautiful song. Same with Steller's jays. Steller's jays appear in the park in the winter. There's no confirmed nesting in the park. They're common breeders in the conifer forests. Steller's jay, named after Joseph Steller, was not a Steller jay, it's Steller's jay. And this is the blue jay, which a lot of people call Steller's jay. This is the blue jay that has been seen in the park, I think, only twice, but it occasionally shows up in Wenatchee, of course, from the east. Blue jay, not very common, sort of a rarity in the park. So this is the gray egret. This is a symbol for the National Audubon Society because they were hunted almost to extinction for their plumes, for hats. And there's a large nesting colony which was probably taken there down by Moses Lake in Potter's Reservoir. Great egret. There was a great egret seen on the 27th of September at Confluence Park. So they show up in the fall. Mostly it's post-breeding dispersal. The extra young birds, mostly young birds, just disperse away from their nesting area around Moses Lake. Great egrets. And they dance around, they nest on top of trees, and interesting displays over their nests. In the fall and winter, and also in the spring, we get these very small birds called kinglets. This is a golden crowned kinglet. They're almost as small as a hummingbird. Mostly in the fall migration, and occasionally there's some around in the winter. Golden crowned kinglet. This is the ruby crowned kinglet. Very common migrant, very distinctive song. It's called a ruby crowned kinglet. If we can see the other side of its head, you would not see any ruby on its crown. Because they never show that. They only show it in their breeding areas. This is the same species, and it's displaying to the female. But they only do this in the conifer forest. This is the ruby crowned kinglet. Another rare woodpecker that shows up is common up in by Badger Mountain. Only migration, Lewis woodpecker. Rare bird in the park, a common bird in our forest. Another bird that's common out in the basin, the forester's tern. And you see quite a few rare terns, almost always in September, off the bench. You want to see these terns. This is the forester's tern. And this is the black tern. We see other rare terns at the park, out over the river, off of the bench, off Bowl Park. The black tern. And Bonaparte's gull, another fall migrant to the park, a small gull, a small black bill, Bonaparte's gull. A bird that's common, a common nester at Moses Lake, both in the lake and in Potholes Reservoir, is the western grebe. These birds do carry their young on their back. This is what we will see at Wenatchee. This is a western grebe. And hummingbirds coming through in the fall include the Annis hummingbird, which is a wintering bird. And of course, then in the fall, the bald eagles start to show up. There are bald eagles nesting fairly close to the park. They nest in cashmere, but they They've never nested in the park or wintering. There's a nested cashmere, so we get to watch them play around from our backyard. So here's a juvenile bald eagle with an adult. Juvenile bald eagles look quite a bit different from juvenile golden eagles because the pattern of their white is pretty uniform across their body. There's no large patches. So this is a young bird trying to keep up with its parent. Very photogenic birds, bald eagles. And they catch their fish very differently. They don't plunge straight down in the water. They fly along and then just dip down and grab and never get their feathers wet. Whereas osprey, where they go straight down and get completely soaked. And kingfishers go head first. So bald eagle fishing, bald eagle catching a fish, looks like. You have to be a good photographer to get these kind of pictures. Bald eagles are fun to watch fly around. They can manipulate, and they commonly manipulate their fish and other items in their talons, including all kinds of weird things that they exchange with their mate. They have a mating ritual where they take, it's usually some kind of food, but they'll take items and then exchange them with their mate and fall through the air. We see this occasionally from our house. Dive straight down, catch up with their mate, and then they lock talons and fall through the air in unison as their mating display. So this looks like a pair of bald eagles that were probably in a mating display, and then along comes a juvenile and kind of got in the way of something. I'm not sure exactly what happened. But they're famous for these dramatic aerial displays, bald eagles. They're just not showing up in the park. They show up in October, and they're fairly common in the park. But they only do this mating display in the spring. There's a good picture of an immature, especially a juvenile. It takes about 4 years to get their white head, bald eagle. The bald eagles, they have a longer wingspan and they're a little bit bigger than the golden eagle. The golden eagle actually weighs a little bit more than the bald eagle. They have a splotchy white throughout their plumage. Golden eagles have white patches and a white patch on their tail. This is a juvenile bald eagle. Merlins, a little falcon that comes through the park mostly in the fall. This is the black merlin. It's a subspecies that breeds up in British Columbia. We saw one, I saw one at my house this fall, coming through, black merlin. Little falcon. This is a sharp-shinned hawk. These are the birds that catch other small birds. It's a simpler. They have a more rounded wing. Actually, ornithologically, we can go back and look at it. They just split off and made a whole new order of birds. They split the falcons off and gave them their own order, Falconiformes. And then they put all the other hawks into as superforms. So they made a whole new separate order for the falcons just recently. They did that. Split off. And they're not even closely related based on DNA. Falcons and hawks are only similar like convergent evolution, just happen to be predators. This is a male, adult, it's not a, I don't know if it's a male or female, it's an adult plumage sharp-shinned hawk. You can see why they're called sharp-shinned hawks. They have a very long tibial tarsus, and they're eating small birds. Saw a bird that was exactly like us, the sleeping lady, last Sunday. Sharp-shinned hawk. Another bird that breeds, does not breed in the park, but occasionally visits, is the northern harrier. So this bird, it looks like an owl, but it's not an owl, it's a superformes. And they hunt by listening. They hear the mice in the grass and they dive down. This is northern harrier, a fairly uncommon visitor to the park. Mostly in the fall we see them. And there's the peregrine falcon. These birds were almost extinct in North America because of DDT, and then the Endangered Species Act protected them. And now we have several breeding pairs in the Wenatchee River drainage, mostly in Tumwater Canyon and up Icicle Creek. And they come down to the park occasionally. We see them flying through the park. peregrine falcons. A bird that shows up in the fall, occasionally in the park, is the short-eared owl. And they hunt in a very similar way to the northern harrier. They listen for the prey and they pounce down into the grass. Short-eared owl. They're very common in the basin, and they just occasionally come, probably post-breeding dispersal from the basin, from the Moses Lake area. They like to perch on fence posts. These pictures were probably taken out somewhere in the basin. And then they do this weird thing. I've seen lots of pictures of these, and I've actually seen them do this. They don't know what they're doing. They just sort of scrunch up and pull their feathers up over their head and do this funny display. I've seen other photographers take pictures like this. It's like the wind might even be blowing here a little bit. Short-eared owl. Fairly uncommon visitor, mostly in the fall at the park. Then these birds are nesters up in the forests around Wenatchee. The saw-whet owl, the small owl. And they come in the fall and winter in the valley, and there's a few that winter we see occasionally in the park. Saw-whet owls, small owl. The barn owls are occasionally seen in the summer. They're mostly in the winter and the spring and fall. They roost down in the park. You go down at night in the fall and the spring, you can see barn owls roosting in the park. Then in the fall, we have more of the little sandpipers come through. This is the most common sandpiper in the park, least sandpiper. These sandpipers have the yellow legs, a short bill. They're by far the smallest sandpiper. They're almost the size of a sparrow, least sandpiper. Other sandpipers come through, a little larger sandpiper with a lot of streaks on its breast. This is a pectoral sandpiper. Has a heavier bill that's uniformly decurved. Pectoral sandpiper. Fairly uncommon fall migrant through the park. Again, you would see these from the bench looking out into the bay for a long walk in the park. This is another fairly common fall migrant, the western sandpiper. You can tell it's got a longer bill and it's only very slightly decurved. It's got black legs. This is a juvenile that's got some rufous colors on its scapulars. A rare bird, green heron, just appears usually in the fall. Again, it's probably post-breeding dispersal from the west side. They come from western Washington, we're calling them western Washington. Green heron. I've seen these on both sides of the Wenatchee River, both from the RV Park, State Park, and from Moran. Really rare. Then in the fall, all the waterfowl come back. So these are very common in the park all winter. American widgeon. And this is the typical male American widgeon. And there's quite a bit of variance in the waterfowl, variations in the waterfowl. There's an American widgeon that has more of a creamy colored head and cheeks. We call this one the storm widgeon. It's an American widgeon, but it's just a variant. The storm widgeon. Common golden eyes, come in the fall, common birds. And northern shoveler. Huge bill, male northern shoveler. Again, they come in the fall, they spend the winter. These aren't very common in the winter, mostly fall and spring. Northern shovelers. Ring-necked duck. Common bird in the fall and winter. Again, it's not named for its ring around its bill. It's got a ring around its neck, which you can barely see. Kind of a brown ring. Ring-necked duck. Common wintering bird in the park. Northern pintail. Again, come in the winter. And come in the fall, and they're mostly gone in the winter, and then they come again in the spring. They're migrating waterfowl. And watch them fly in. It's hard to get these kind of photographs of ducks flying, especially like this together. These birds that were molted like this is probably a young male. Maybe a young male, probably older males here. Groups of, it's a female there in the middle. Barrel's golden eyes nest up in Chelan County, up in the mountains, and they mostly are seen in the fall and the spring. Rare winter They have the crescent shaped mark on the head. Barrels going by. Canvasback, come in the fall, spend the winter. And redhead, another wintering bird, comes in the fall, leaves in the spring. Never seen them in the summer. They breed up in northern Canada and Alaska. The ray duck, you never seen them in this plumage. This will be one of the very few waterfowl that has a molting pattern like a songbird. It molts into its breeding plumage in the spring. It's in the breeding plumage all summer, and then it molts in the fall and has a drab plumage all winter, or the opposite of most ducks. Again, these are only in the winter. You only see these ray ducks in the winter. Buffleheads, common in the fall and winter. There's small duck, diver duck, bufflehead. And hooded mergansers, very common in winter and fall and spring. We occasionally see hooded mergansers in the summer, but we've never seen them breeding. No breeding evidence of hooded mergansers, male and female. So again, ducks have a lot of dimorphism, a lot of sexual dimorphism. Warblers have some sexual dimorphism. Shorebirds don't. So male and female hooded mergansers. This bird shows up in the winter from the mountains, varied thrush. And it's in town too, but it shows up in the park. Related to the robin. Varied thrush. Another winter bird. The one comes down in the winter from northern Canada and Alaska. Used to be sort of called the butcher bird. This is one of the few songbirds that actually eats mice. The northern shrike. And it's a songbird. Its feet are very weak. It's a perching bird. But it's got this huge raptorial bill. So what it does is it impales its prey on a thorn or on a barbed wire fence. And then it uses its neck and its bill to pull the meat off of the bird. It's called a butcher bird. Northern shrike. We've never seen the other shrike in the park. The log-red shrike has never been in the park. Northern shrikes nest way up high in latitudes, way up in northern Alaska and northern Canada, and only winter here. Northern shrike. Another bird that comes down for the winter is the brown creeper. They hunt going up the trunk. And then another bird that's common, the common breeder in the surrounding area, but never has been seen breeding in the park. They're not even there in the summer. Is the spotted towhee. Used to be called the rufous-sided towhee. I learned it as a rufous-sided towhee, so 10, 20 years ago I had to stop calling it that and call it the spotted towhee. Fox sparrows come to the park in the spring and summer, and occasionally they're there in the winter. Fox sparrows have, like a songbird, but they don't have any streaks on their head. They have a uniformly colored head. And then, very common migrant to the park, and they're also here in the winter, the golden-crowned sparrow. And don't get it confused with the juvenile white-crowned sparrow. This is see in a minute. This is an American tree sparrow, wintering bird only. And occasionally they come down to the park. American tree sparrow have a bicolored bill, and gray head, this rufous marks on the head, American tree sparrow. Another bird that rarely comes into the park in the winter, but occasionally see these common redpolls in the winter. One of the most common birds in the winter in the park is either this bird, the dark-eyed junco, or the white-crowned sparrow. So these used to be called Oregon junco. And then the lumpers lumped them together and decided they're all interbreeding with each other, so they call them all the dark-eyed juncos. And apparently that's going to stick. We're stuck with the dark-eyed junco. I like Oregon junco much better, but we're stuck with dark-eyed junco. We may get Audubon's warbler back, but we're stuck with dark-eyed junco. So, very common bird. If you put a feeder out, black hood, or whitish flesh-colored bill, white outer tail feathers, one of our most common birds. Winter only, never breeding park, dark-eyed junco. White crowned sparrow, very common wintering bird, and they also migrate through the park, but a lot of them stick around in the winter. And here is a juvenile white crowned sparrow. People sometimes call these confused and call them golden crowned sparrows, but they have more yellow bill, and their crown is brown with a sort of a tan central stripe. Golden crowned sparrows have black stripes and a golden central stripe down there. So when you show the bird presentation, you end not with a sunset, but with birds flying out over something. Yeah. Okay, so I will take some questions, and we can go back and look at pictures if you want. Yes, sir.
I have rarely seen a behavior that I wonder about from osprey down at the Confluence in an area we call Mulberry Lake and out on the river too, where they come down and rather than plunging into the water, they skim, the osprey skims across the water with its talons in the water like it's trolling. Is that common, or can you account for that?
I mean, sort of like you would expect a bald eagle to do?
Well, yeah, except bald eagles usually come down, they grab and they're gone.
Right.
This thing, this behavior is that they come down and they dip their talons in the water and then they go across the water for 50, 100 feet with their talons in the water about an inch or two. Have you seen that?
I've never seen that, but
It's amazing.
I'll watch for it.
I've seen it a couple of times.
There's some birds that fish like that.
Yeah, this is an osprey. Really
Yeah.
osprey.
Other birds I've seen fish with their bill like that, never an osprey. And it must be something that's trying to. I've never seen an osprey catch fish like that.
Yeah, well, I didn't see it catch the fish, but it seemed like that was what it was about. It's
Interesting. I'll keep my eye open for that kind of thing. Yeah. Interesting. Thank you. Sorry, can't help you. Yes, sir.
It sounds like you noticed some of the species arriving earlier due to climate change, like the Bullock's Oriole you mentioned. Has your research shown any other effects of climate change?
There's just anecdotal observations as far as I've done, but scientists have studied climate change and bird, populations, bird dynamics for about 10 or 20 years now. So one group, the Institute for Bird Populations, did study climate change. They looked at 168 species, and they looked at 2 different climate change models, and they ranked the birds based on the vulnerability to climate change. And they found that there's one species that's extremely vulnerable to climate change, and that's the white-tailed ptarmigan. Most of the species that are vulnerable to climate change are alpine and subalpine species, and some are riparian species. So the water and the riparian areas are impacted, and the subalpine and alpine forests are impacted. Some of the other birds that are subject to climate change from that study include bald eagles, because they're riparian species. Indian grosbeaks are vulnerable. So they just list the birds based on their vulnerability to climate change. So there are other species. The peregrine falcon is one that's vulnerable. And so they use nesting and banding data and habitat information, population dynamics, and try to identify the birds whether they're vulnerable or not. So yeah, there's been it's the canary in the coal mine idea, right? They're an indicator of our, the health of our habitats. Yes, sir.
Can I get some clarification on administrative responsibilities for Confluence State Park,
Sure.
Moran, and Walla Walla?
Sure. In all 3 parks, the whole area is owned by the Chelan PUD.
Confluence State Park is...
Confluence State Park is owned by the Chelan County PUD. Okay? And the RV Park is administered by the Washington State Parks. Moran Natural Area is also administered by the Washington State Parks. Walla Walla Point Park is administered by the Chelan PUD. the whole area is owned, the land itself is owned by the PUD. The Cheyenne PUD administers the Walwala Park, the baseball diamond and everything. And the state park administers the rest of it.
So the state park administers the rate.
Yes. Yep, that's correct. Now, that's changed over the years, but I think it's been that way for about the last 10, 15 years now. So, yeah, and the PUD has a wildlife biologist. The state park has some rangers, and I know a couple of them that are good birders, but they're mostly concerned with managing for visitors and, of course, the RV park. Yes.
I understood that they were going to re-inject water into the Hawaiian refuge, but I haven't seen any.
Okay, that's the big question I was expecting to get. I mentioned it briefly. So if you've been down there the last 5 years, you've noticed there's less water in the park. Okay, so what happened in 2011, the Pioneer Irrigation District shut off the water drainage from their irrigation system. It just came down through the city, and no one can control it. It's their own district, their own water. So there's a huge decrease in the amount of water that flowed into the park starting in 2011. And it pretty much dried up the main pond. There's a little bit of water that seeps in a couple other places. It's sort of drain water, storm drain water from the city. But the main source of the water was cut off completely. And they're not going to probably put it back. So the PUD is studying the issue. They're trying to figure out how to get water. But water is something you don't just go and get. There's water in the river, but you have to pump it out of the river. And then it would be impacting salmon water flows, and so it's a really tricky issue. And the PUD does have some major, if you want to know more about it, the Cheyenne County PUD would give you more information. But they are studying the issue, and it is a serious problem. Like I mentioned with the red and blackbirds, it is hardly get red and blackbirds down there anymore because that main pond where they nested is dried up, and they need that aquatic habitat to nest in. So there's all kinds of studies going on, hydrologists are looking at it, and they are supposed to be defining a new water source. Yes?
I'm interested, I noticed at the border of Confluence Park, on the north side, not the right side, but on the north side, there's quite a bit of land there.
Yes.
The channels now,
Yes.
my husband and I will comment on being on in there.
Right.
Is anybody administering that area? I know he has come across people that hunt in that area. It's a blind during hunting season.
The hunting is closed between the bridges. It's been closed for about 3 or 4 years between the bridges.
We've seen people hunt there.
They're not supposed to be hunting in there. It's closed. Call the county sheriff is the person to call for that. Now hunting was allowed down there until fairly recently. And the county commissioners, both in Cheyenne and Douglas County, put pressure on the PUD to close that. But it's closed to hunting. So there's no hunting in there.
But in that area, there are quite a few different areas here where red and blackbird.
Yeah, there's some beautiful areas. It's hard to bird that area because there's a huge chain link fence going all the way across between the RV park and that area we're talking about. If you go clear to the east end of that chain link fence, you can climb around through the brush and get back in there, but it's so thick you can't really walk around in everywhere. So there's a big flat area, sort of on the downstream side and the east end of the area you're talking about. That's got really good habitat for shorebirds. It's really hard to access that area. So if you see someone hunting in there, it's a county sheriff who is jurisdiction, and they might call the game wardens to go in there. But all hunting is closed between the 2 bridges. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that the magpies have a pupil service. Do Brewers blackbirds do anything along that line? I'm pretty sure my daughter and I were up to the service this summer. Something like that. It was to get Brewers blackbird on the road, and there were 3 or 4 that were perched on some wires right above us, and we're going away. It seemed really interested as we moved the body out.
It might have been young and a parent or something like that. reason that magpies do that is because something killed one of their conspecifics, a hawk or something, and what they're trying to do is warn all the other magpies in the area that there's something dangerous going on. And they go through this ritual. It's a ritualized behavior. They do it at the same time. When they find one of their dead conspecifics, the same species, they go through this elaborate ritualized behavior. So you may have seen something like that. Probably what you saw were the young birds or the mates, or the mate of the one who was killed, just trying to figure out what's happened to their mate. Or their parent. But I don't know, other species may do that. It's only documented, well, elephants do it, right? Elephants have a funeral where they find a dead elephant. They do something like that. They carry the bones around and they do different things with it. As far as I know, it's only been documented in magpies. That's one of the unique things about magpies. So you probably saw something similar to that, an actual funeral service. Yeah. Yes?
Just wondering, when did your first interest of birds?
Well, one of the little blurbs that came out on the college website talked about the first bird I ever identified. So my family has some cabins at a resort up in central Idaho. So when I was about 6 years old, I was out fishing and bird watching, and I saw a water ouzel. I identified the water ouzel when I was about 6 years old. That was the first bird I really remember identifying as a specific bird. So that was in 1960, I guess. Now it's called something else, though, right? What's a water ouzel called? American dipper. So they changed all the cool names to these bizarre, descriptive names. They changed water ouzel to American dipper. Because it dips. Water ouzel is a much better name. The dippers do come down to the park. In the winter, you see a few rarely along the river, but they're mostly breeders up in the mountains, in Icicle Creek or something. So how are we doing on time? Are we about out of time? Okay, any more questions? We do have some checklists of the park. Yes, yes, sir.
I didn't catch the name of the bird, but the bird that lays in states and other birds.
Brown-headed cowbird.
Yeah, but any ideas why that
Well, they don't have to spend any time and energy raising their young. So they just, they get to just spend all their time mating and laying eggs. And some species actually have figured that out, and they kick the cowbird eggs out of their nests. But it's a free way to get your young raised. So it's surprising that it's not more common. Really. It's sort of what some humans do, right? They raise their people's young, or they raise their grandchildren or something like that. We think it would happen often. But it's very common, it's not as common, it's more common in Asia, where the cuckoos do that. Some cuckoos do that. And there's other cowbirds that they just don't have it. It's your own species. So it's just an energetic thing, just raising, saving their energy. The great egret, yeah, the white one, yeah. Long plumage, yeah. No, they're the same. There's no dimorphism in them. Almost all the great blue heron and the female male are the same. So they look exactly the same. They almost go extinct because of the plumage. Yes.
Are there rails in the
Yes.
resort in the park?
There are rails in the park. I didn't put a picture in. I could have put a few more pictures, I guess, but the Soras and Virginia rails are both in the park, and they're both overwintered, and they're there year-round, and we haven't got confirmation for sure of them nesting in the park. Soras probably nest in the park, but I've seen them in the summer, actively calling. But they're down in the thick brush in the cattails, and so we just haven't got confirmation of the breeding. Yes, Scott?
How many species total have you found?
I think it's 246 species in the park. And 41 nesting, confirmed breeding birds. So that's a pretty small number. So over 100 species are just migrants, they're just migrating through. And some are just random birds just landing. So, if anyone sees any birds, be sure to let me know. I'd like to add to that list. Is there a question? No, it's on my bucket list though. Yes, yeah. More diversity down there. I've been to Belize and Guatemala, as close as I've been. Surprisingly, a lot of our warbirds, I saw several of our warbird species when I was down there because they wintered in Central America. So I saw American red starts down there in winter. I saw hidden warbirds and other warbirds. So a lot of our birds will be down there in winter and you see our breeding birds. Tropical areas. That's on my bucket list.